his chance at seeing you.
Stacking the court with minority rule ideologues has been a long-standing tradition in the American experience. One particularly horrific example was Roger B. Taney, a slaveholder from Maryland. He was appointed Chief Justice by Andrew Jackson in 1837 and held that post until he died in 1864. An unapologetic racist, the most notable example of his legacy came in 1857 with the Dred Scott decision, where he wrote that blacks could not be considered citizens, and the prohibition of slavery in every U.S. territory was unconstitutional. Now we have the Roberts Court. In 2013, the Shelby v. Holder 5-4 decision gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice Roberts essentially declared that racism no longer existed in America, therefore, federal voting protections were no longer needed. The ink wasn't dry on that opinion when state legislators across the land passed bills making it harder to vote. Along comes the dynamic duo of Donald Trump and Moscow Mitch, who got 3 more extremist ideologues appointed in 4 years. They already voted for the Texas vigilante snitch on your neighbor and get 10 grand law, which dismantled reproductive health care in the nation's second largest state. Can anything be done to address the issue of minority policy in America becoming the majority position in the court? If so, what? 80% of the people of America want background checks for gun ownership. Can't get that through. The last time they talked about that, the courts were really in favor, especially Brett Kavanaugh, were really all for the gun ownership and didn't want to do anything, to disturb the Second Amendment. Dan, what do you think about that? Are we stuck with this situation of what the people want is not what we're going to get because of the way the Supreme Court is constituted?
Yes. It's our nominating process. We don't have the court has this conceit that it is apolitical, but that is not true because the nominees to the court come from our politically elected leaders. So I do kind of rub it in the face of everybody who's ever outraged by the Supreme Court and didn't vote in 2016. Well, you did this. You got what you wanted, because we would have a bit of a different situation. But as long as the Senate Majority Leader controls whether or not a judicial nominee gets a hearing, and McConnell held open seats that Barack Obama should have been able to fill in the Fifth Circuit and in the Supreme Court until Donald Trump was there. And then he fast-tracked every Trump nominee right on through for every judicial system. You can't stop it unless you change the nominating process. I am rather in favor of the idea of a president hands the Senate Majority Leader a list of things that this must be done in this legislative session. You will schedule it as such, rather than letting the Senate have its own autonomy there. Because that was how McConnell was able to do it. He just did not give hearings. He would not allow the question to come up to a vote. And that was his right as the rules are currently written. And then it was Donald Trump's right to nominate these people. Now, I'm not going to be naive enough to think that, Joe Biden and Barack Obama knew everybody and the records of everyone they wanted to nominate for the Supreme Court. They know that they had people who did that for them, and then they picked from a list of candidates. And I know that's exactly what Donald Trump did too. But as long as it's a politician who's making that choice, you cannot have an apolitical body, and you are going to pick people who are politically aligned with you, their ideology is going to be the same as yours. Like, I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was amazing. She had Bill Clinton's political ideology. He was the one who nominated her. I really think that all of Trump's people should be resigning in disgrace. And, maybe they'll do that after they've got Roe, but they're holding on for that. They had no interest in doing anything to delegitimize themselves because they knew this was coming, and this was their shot. So yeah, I think as long as we are going to have our political leaders appoint the judges, then we have no other option than to accept that they will be political. If I have to appoint someone, I'm not going to appoint someone who I know is actively going to undo everything I'm attempting to do.
Okay, Judy. Dan says as long as we have political people making the appointments, we're going to get the political ideology of the appointer on the courts, which is what we have now. Is that right?
Well, I think that's right. I agree with him. The makeup of the court doesn't change until the other two branches change. So that's the difference between Amy Coney Barrett and Ketanji Brown Jackson. That's entirely due to the makeup of the Senate and to who was president. As far, of course, Obama and Biden are having their nominees vetted by various people and are getting advice, but that's really nothing like the machine that the Republicans have in the Federalist Society that draws up a slate and has been since it was formed in the early 80s for the express purpose of getting conservative nominees confirmed. So they have a juggernaut going on, and I'm not aware of anything the Democrats have that is equal to that. But that wouldn't matter so much if we would get out and vote for, I guess I will say, a Democratic Congress and president.
Yeah, well, Dam's right about the idea of taking people to task for complaining about the makeup of the Supreme Court when they didn't even vote in 2016, because that lack of vote, especially here in Pennsylvania, was a direct result of Trump's ability to get 3 of those judges put on.
And she warned us. She warned us in multiple speeches. The next president will get to appoint up to 3. And he did. He got all 3. So if you did not vote for her, you voted for him getting those 3.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think that the Republicans have understood a lot better for a long period of time how important it is to deal with the Supreme Court, to get candidates appointed, nominees, I should say, appointed to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure. Biden has apparently submitted a lot of nominations, but I think sometimes Democratic presidents are a little more lackadaisical about it than Republicans.
Well, if we didn't learn our lesson after 4 years of Trump, then the Democrats, shame on them. So what do you think about that, Sam?
Well, I mean, my ears perk up when you mentioned the snitch law in Texas. And you ask, can anything be done to address this minority policy in America? And my first thing is, still as a hopeful, I'm not going to say young woman, but at least youthful-ish American, is to say, yeah, let's educate our young people on the power that the judicial system has in their literal day-to-day lives. How many young people understand the judicial system until they're stopped for speeding or a parking ticket or, anything? But literally, the laws that apply to them, I I don't think my children have a clue except for what I teach them. Uh, Speaking to abortion, and I know that's hot button and nobody really loves to go there. I think that particular issue, I think that it really balances on the crux of the idea of when life begins. And because it was decided in 1991 that life begins at conception, whereas previously it was thought that life began at birth and first breath. When it became conception, that's when it really became fodder for the Christian conservative right. And that's when it became easy to push an anti-abortion program in America. Because then you have the moral high ground of, we're saving babies, don't you love babies? Little babies, but because you change the concept of when life begins. I minority policy, to me, that's part of it. The minority switches it, don't they? To make it about this hot button issue, to make it about this emotional issue, so that everybody gets on board. You say minority, yes, but it's a minority who pulls a majority, because they make it a black and white instead of the very nuanced, complicated, serious issue that it really is.
With abortion, I think it has more to do with not with the babies as much as just having sex. We don't want these people to have sex, and if they have sex, they're going to pay.
Well, no,
So-
of course,
No, you don't. Women.
sure, but it has more to do with controlling women than anything.
Right, right.
The basic of it is controlling women.
Yeah.
We could have a
Not
whole
allowed to have
show
sex.
about this, Paul.
Women aren't allowed to have sex.
Well, that's why.
Women aren't allowed. Women can have sex, yes, all day long, every day, every second of the day, as long as they show it, talk about it, read about it, put it out there on the internet and the TV, and then can't control it. The women, they can't control it.
It has to be controlled by the men.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And society at large.
Judy, you had something to say there.
Well, something caused me to think about the fact that not only is Roe v. Wade under attack, and in the manner that Samantha has outlined, but there are people who think that Griswold v. Connecticut, which is the right to contraception, is under attack, which goes along, Paul, with what you said is you can't have sex.
Right.
Right. But that also goes back to just a thorough misunderstanding of the human reproductive system. The conservatives who want to say that you should not be able to take these pills, birth control or Plan B, they want to say these are abortifacients. They are not, and it's ridiculous. The ovum are not connected to the fallopian tubes, and I think that's a very important thing to understand, because when an abortifacient is in play, you're literally pulling a implanted ovum that is fertilized, whereas birth control and the Plan B pill do not allow implantation. But of course, if you've decided in your grand scheme that a person is a person at conception, which is when sperm meets ovum, then you've opened up a whole world of moral outrage. I mean, come on now. 50% of fertilized ovum are passed by women who have sex.
But
Sorry, Dolly, you got me
Samantha,
going.
no, Samantha, you have to understand facts have nothing to do with it.
These are the people you're talking about think that you can take an ectopic pregnancy and just move the embryo, and that's a thing that happens.
I
So-
know a very Christian, very conservative young woman who had an ectopic pregnancy removed to save her life.
But she
I know
didn't
her
have it
very
put.
well.
But she
And
didn't have
she is
it put
anti-abortion.
back in there.
Right. She is anti-abortion. She is staunchly anti-abortion, and yet had an ectopic pregnancy removed. Is that not abortion?
So
Does
it's
she
okay for her
understand
to
that?
do what she wants to do, but not okay for anyone else to do what they want to do.
Rules for
Exactly.
thee and not for me.
Yep.
Okay. In the previous question, I cited one law, Voting Rights of 1965, passed by the legislative branch, signed by the executive branch, and declared null and void by the judicial branch. There is another very contentious issue. Surprise, surprise, we just talked about it. The right of a woman to control her own reproductive decisions that has pretty much avoided any significant federal legislative involvement by staying almost exclusively in the judicial arena. Once Roe v. Wade decision came online in 1973, Congress passed only one statute that even remotely affected the policy. That was the 1980 Hyde Amendment, which prohibited federal funds paying for the abortions of poor women who were financially strapped. State legislatures have passed bunches of laws like the Texas snitch law cited above, restricting access to reproductive health care, which our current right-wing extremist Supreme Court appears to be all for. At least that's what they sounded like whenever they were talking about it, the Mississippi law. So, since Congress has had almost 50 years to codify the rights initiated by the court with Roe, doesn't the legislative branch own most of the blame for not taking the responsibility required to protect women's reproductive health care? Congress could have done something in 1974 and said, okay, Roe says this, let's let it happen, let's make it a federal law, and then we'd be done with it. Sam, does Congress own some responsibility here?
Absolutely, certainly. And as does the judicial branch for not upholding settled law. This was settled law, and it's not being upheld. But at its heart, this is not an abortion issue. It's a privacy issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is a privacy issue. In the state of Alaska, something I'm proud of, which I know will be attacked sooner or later, it's the Privacy Act in the state of Alaska that upholds our abortion rights. It's not even an abortion law, it's a privacy law, and abortion is somewhere like it counts number 7 or 10 somewhere in the rankings underneath the Privacy Act. Nobody needs to know what goes on in any woman's uterus. When you allow law to enter into a woman's literal womb, you're committing a sort of biological tyranny here. It's insanity. I'm not going to go there too deep because I'm sorry, but this one really gets me. Maybe you should do an abortion show. Oh.
Well, actually, after the next one's going to be about the midterm primaries, and after that, we're going to do reproductive health care. Yeah.
Right.
So you're waiting for Roe to get gutted, and then you're going to have your show.
It depends on the timing, but it's going to be the two shows from now, regardless of what happens with the Mississippi law. Okay, Dan, what do you think about that?
Oh, yes, the legislative branch, it is 100% their fault. But they're working within the system as designed, and they are getting the result they want. We don't have to touch this. We know we can be performative about this issue, and at the end of the day, Roe will stop this from happening. So we don't have to worry about it. We can yell and we can scream and we can make a lot of noise and we can raise a lot of money. And I think I'm not trying to find a silver lining to the handmaidification of America that is on its way. I am not trying to do that. But I do think once Roe is overturned and all of these states start making laws that prohibit abortion in all but the most extreme cases, and probably not even then because women aren't people anymore, so why should we worry about them? The Republican fundraising apparatus is going to start to run into difficulty. I think that by design, the people on the left in Congress did not want to face the juggernaut of the evangelical Christians trying to scream them out of office. And the people on the right wanted to scream very loudly about it, but did not actually want to do anything because the issue lined their coffers. And now they've got the court that is going to get rid of it, unless there's some originalist argument that Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch all buy into, because Thomas is not. Thomas has already written the destruction of it before he's heard arguments. He might have to change a few words, but that's all ready to go. Roberts and Alito are right there with him. They're all ready to sign it. Coney Barrett has probably helped them write it to give a woman's perspective to that issue. But I'm really, really sure that this was a deliberate choice on everyone's part. And that's why it's happened. You don't want to expose the ideological cracks on either side, because I do believe that Collins and Murkowski, if they were just using those two as an example as Republicans, if they were presented with a bill to outlaw abortion, they would vote against it. I also believe that a Democratic senator like Casey, if presented with that bill, might have voted for it. Like Bob Casey's dad is the Casey versus Planned Parenthood. So
Yeah, right.
it would not surprise me if that happened, and that would expose ideological divides in both parties, and neither one of the leaderships want to deal with that. I remember, I want to say 2018, when I believe Bernie Sanders made a comment about Democrats need to accept more anti-choice members and run more anti-choice members. And the context of this was he was trying to explain how we could win races in rural areas. I was highly offended by the comment and said, "Fuck you, Bernie," which is something I've been saying for a long time.
I've been hearing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like it. But that his ideology here clashed with mine. I think that we should have a legislative statute, and he thinks he's okay with that kind of sacrifice. There are other members of the party who won't be. That's going to split us more, which might bring us down to maybe the tents are too big on both sides. But I don't agree with the death penalty. I do agree with abortion. I'm very pro environmental justice, but I'm anti-poverty and go civil rights and anti-racism and all that. But I'm further left, I think, than a lot of the people in my party. I think a lot more of us are centrist, and if you scratch the surface, reproductive health care is not going to be on a lot of people's issues, and they might not be okay with it. So I think that Congress has deliberately avoided the issue as much as they possibly can, unless it is to the benefit of an individual congressman. And now they have taken it to the place where they've milked the cow. There's nothing left, and it's going to be destroyed. And they knew exactly what they were doing by appointing these conservative judicial justices.
So they want to scream about it, but they don't want to vote about it.
Correct. Gun control will get a lot louder after Roe is gone, even if there is nothing that the Democrats are putting forth to enact it, because you'll need a new issue.
Yeah, well, they're putting it forth. They're just not getting it past the Manchin cinema filibuster issue.
Yeah, we need
Okay.
2 more Democratic senators, just 2. And Elizabeth Warren was on a podcast today. She was on today's episode of Pod Save America, pointing out if we get 2 more Democratic senators and hold the House, she thinks we don't need Roe anymore because we can just make a federal law. I think she's wrong, but I do think those 2 more senators will allow us to do a lot more. So go vote in your midterms.
Yeah, I think as a mathematician, I think she has the numbers right on that.
Yeah, she doesn't have the ideology of her party right.
Yeah, right. But you can get a lot of votes for things that.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did I misunderstand or mishear, Dan? What did you say about Roe votes? Did you say Roe votes?
Elizabeth Warren said today she said it last March, but the interview was published today, that if Democrats get 2 more senators so that Manchin and Sinema are no longer relevant entities,
Right.
then and we hold the House, she thinks that we can actually pass a law to protect a woman's right to an abortion.
To further codify Roe.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I misunderstood. I thought
Roe not
sorry,
being an act.
my stupid ear said my ear heard something different. But codifying Roe.
Yes.
Yeah, Roe is a court case. What Dan's talking about is legislating it.
Right. It's settled law, but codifying it. Right.
Yeah.
However,
go ahead, Judy. It's your turn anyway.
sorry. Yeah, I hate to be a wet blanket here. And I agree with all these extraneous reasons people might have for not having done anything. I agree with that. Paul, you said when you asked the question, something about if Congress had passed a law protecting women's rights, it would be done. I don't agree that it would be done because people would be filing lawsuits to declare the federal statute unconstitutional, and we would be right back where we are. Except that the one argument about legislating from the bench and judge-made law would be eliminated. So that eliminates one of the usual arguments against something like Roe. But I'm not sure that this would be over.
No, it wouldn't be. Because you don't stop subjugating people, do you?
No, you find another way. Yeah.
Yeah, you just find other avenues of subjugating.
Well, when I was listening to the oral arguments, Kavanaugh was basically saying that since there isn't anything in the Constitution that addresses abortion, just like the word marriage is nowhere in the Constitution either, that the states ought to be able to have the right to do that. So what he's basically arguing is these state legislatures should be able to have the right to pass whatever law they want. Now, if there was a federal law, he would basically, following that argument, saying the feds have a right to pass whatever law they want too. But he would change the argument. I know they move the goalposts all the time. So you're right, Judy. You're absolutely right about that. Okay, is it even worth pretending that this current court can interpret laws without viewing each case through a partisan lens? I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, but Sam, I'm gonna let you go first on this. Is it all partisan now, or
it has never not been partisan.
Okay.
It has never not been partisan. You have a partisan administration, you will have a partisan judge. Your hope is that your partisan judge, whatever their politics, they will apply the law with integrity. I hate to keep using that word. I feel like I'm using that word a lot in this show and the last one I was on, but it is a very important part of our humanity when we are in certain positions, particularly in governing positions.
Oh, it's an important feature if we're going to have a fair society, having integrity brought into the process.
Right.
So Dan, you think there's do you agree with Sam here that everything's partisan? That everything we look at is through a partisan lens, including the courts?
Everything is partisan because people are partisan, and the judges and justices are people. I do think that you are capable of doing things with integrity and to the point of your job. Using the Supreme Court as an example, one of the big lie freak shows was Trump tried to take his stunning election defeat to the Supreme Court to overturn it, and 8 of the 9 justices said no. You've got nothing here. We're not going to listen to it. The other justice is Clarence Thomas, who does not hide that he is completely partisan. But the rest of them do want some veneer of integrity. Like there is nothing here. We might wish this had turned out a different way, but we have no authority to intercede. So no, go away. So 8 of the 9 were able to do that. And
So that was one example of integrity winning the day.
yes, but I also said earlier, I think that these people also are salivating to destroy Roe and did not want to impugn the authority of the court by appearing too partisan. So it was easy to cut loose the tame monkey and send him off on his helicopter ride and look like they were doing the right thing and just respected the rule of law, except for Clarence. And I don't understand why he I don't understand why he didn't get that. But the rest
We'll
of
get to
them,
that. We'll get to that in the last question.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
get to that last question. All
Yeah.
right, Judy. Go
Well,
ahead.
I think that probably as human beings, whether the judges look at something in a partisan way or not, they do look at it in a personal, what their beliefs are and so on. I don't know how you can avoid that, but you don't need to be as partisan as these people have been. You don't need to be chosen by the Federalist Society for your ever dominant conservative views. There's a wonderful quotation. Well, I guess I'll go back. Dan said something about how they don't want to be perceived as partisans, hacks, as Amy Coney Barrett put it. And we are not partisan hacks. Methinks they do protect people. But so on an easy case like the one Dan mentioned, yeah, let's show that we are not partisan hacks. They're conscious of that. Robert's saying, we don't have Trump judges, we don't have Obama judges. They're defensive about it, so they are aware. They're aware of what they're doing. And Linda Greenhouse said of Kavanaugh, and I love this, that he tries to show that he has considered all aspects of a case, of an issue, before he comes to the conservative view he started with.